June 1972, not many people outside of Washington, D.C. had heard of Watergate, a complex of 6 buildings which house a fashionable hotel, offices, apartments, and a retail center with stores and restaurants. That changed after 5 men, Bernard L. Barker, Viriligo R. Gonzalez, Eugenio R. Martinez, Frank A. Sturgis, and James W. McCord, Jr., were arrested in the early hours of June 17 for breaking into the office of the Democratic National Committee. The incident seemed to be only a minor burglary at first, but it soon became famous around the nation and the world as hundreds of stories in newspapers and on television began linking the break-in to President Richard Nixon's presidential campaign. Nixon, a Republican, was running for a second term against Democratic Senator George McGovern of South Dakota.
The contents of the tape that President Nixon released on August 5, 1974 sealed his fate. Most importantly, the tapes confirmed his deep involvement in the Watergate cover-up and exposed his many lies about the affair. But the tapes also revealed that Nixon conducted daily business in the Oval Office in a manner that millions of Americans found morally offensive. With the release of the Watergate tapes, the American public braced itself for the resignation that was almost certain to come. The news is bombarding us again, and no one has no choice but to receive it. To stay by the radio and the phone, wrote journalist Elizabeth Drew in Washington Journal. Events are hurtling forward, and all one can do is try to keep up.
Nixon resigned because of the Watergate scandal, and even 2 decades later when he died, many Americans were still unable to forget or forgive Nixon's involvement in what is considered the worst presidential scandal in U.S. history.
Hello, Mr. Nixon.
Hello.
Would you say that there are certain situations where the president can decide that it's in the best interest of the nation and do something illegal?
Well, when the president does it, it's not illegal.
By definition?
Exactly. If the president, for example, approves something because of the national security, or in this case a threat, then the president's decision in that instance is one that enables those who carry it out to carry it out without violating a law.
But when you said, if the president orders it, that makes it legal, is there anything in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights that suggests the president is that much of a sovereign, that far above the law?
No, there isn't. There's nothing specific that the Constitution contemplates. I haven't read every word, every jot, every title, but I do know that it has been argued that as far as the president is concerned, that in wartime, a president does have certain extraordinary powers which would make acts that would otherwise be unlawful. Lawful if undertaken for the purpose of preserving the nation and the Constitution, which is essential for the rights we're all talking about.
What I still don't understand about March 21st is that why didn't you pick up the phone and call the cops?
I suppose you could sum it all up the way one of your British prime ministers summed it up, Gladstone, which is when the first requirement for a prime minister is to be a good butcher. Well, I think, as far as the summary of Watergate is concerned, I did some big things rather well. I screwed up terribly on what was a little thing and became a big thing, but I have to admit, I wasn't a good butcher.
Would you go further than mistakes? That word that seems not enough for people?
What word would you suggest?
I think that people need to hear an apology. I think unless you say it, you're going to be haunted by it for the rest of your life.
I must say that at any time I seriously considered whether I shouldn't resign, but on the other hand, I felt that I owe it to history to point out from that time on April 30th until I resigned on August 9th, I did some things that were good for this country. And for all of the bad things, I have very deep regret.
So what you're saying is that you got caught up in something and it snowballed?
It snowballed, and it was my fault. I'm not blaming anyone else. I'm simply saying that as far as I'm concerned, I only regret it. I indicate my own beliefs in this way, and I resigned. People didn't think it was enough to admit my mistakes. Fine. If they want me to get down and grovel on the floor, no, never. I'm not a crook.
Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Hello, Mrs. Mitchell.
Hello.
How did your life change after Nixon appointed your husband the Attorney General?
After my husband was appointed, people had more reason to believe that I was outspoken. I was always very friendly, but this gave me an opportunity to speak out about my opinions.
When did you find out what was really happening?
Well, I didn't know about the break-in until 5 days later. And between me and you, Nixon's presidency has been corrupt for such a long time. This isn't the first corruption that's been happening.
What compelled you to call the media?
My husband John started getting accused about the scandal. I had no choice but to reach out to the media. It was the only thing I can do.
How has this impacted you?
Well, you wouldn't believe what they did to me when I tried to call them. I was drugged. I was held down. I was tied up. You wouldn't believe it. It's incredible. It's like reading a James Bond novel. You wouldn't.
Do you think that John Mitchell changed? Was Nixon the same man you met?
Well, as far as my husband is concerned, he does not exist to me anymore. As far as Nixon is concerned, I'd rather not comment.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell.
No, thank you.
Hello, Mrs. Nixon.
Hello.
So, how were your days in the White House as First Lady?
Well, see, it wasn't the life I had chosen, the life of politics, that is, but the only thing I could do was help my husband.
Mrs. Nixon, was it hard for you to transition from being an average wife to the First Lady?
Though it wasn't the life I had chosen, I would say that being the First Lady, I have a responsibility of high virtue and dignity.
So why did you support your husband, even after the scandal?
Well, he's my husband, and I remember those long walks on the beach and all that good stuff. I love him, and I feel that the White House and the residents of the White House should be humble and not be untouchable, let's say.
How come Mr. Nixon didn't make a statement? It's been 2 years now.
I'm sorry, dear. I have no comment.
Well, it was nice to meet you. Thank you.
Bye.
Oh my God, did you hear what Nixon did?
Yeah, I can't believe it. Like, oh my God, how can you do that? I can't even trust the president.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Order. We've gathered here today to discuss the Watergate scandal and how the president was involved in it. I'm not going to be one of those judges who will let someone get away with such a scandal and betrayal, even if he is the president of the United States. Critics may think I overstepped my boundaries by everything I did in search of these tapes, but everything I did was constitutional. Simply stated, I have no intention of sitting on the bench like a nincompoop and watching the parade go by. Yeah, that's it. In directing the White House to produce the tapes, I set myself on a constitutional collision with former President Nixon. He tried to invoke executive privilege and argue that the tapes were not subject to judiciary scrutiny. But in a U.S. Supreme Court, the judiciary must have the last word in an orderly constitutional system. Although the former President Nixon says that the tapes have nothing to do with this trial, they, matter of fact, do. They have a big part in it. The conversations that were recorded in the White House clearly state that the Watergate break-in he made available to prosecutors precipitated Nixon's resignation. Again, I will not be one of those judges who stand on the side. I interviewed people on my own. I tried to figure out as much as I could, and I intend to get the truth out of what the president has done in this Watergate scandal. Thank you. Court adjourned.
You, Richard Milhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear
I, Richard Milhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office
that I will faithfully execute the office
of President of the United States
of President of the United States
and will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Hello, Mrs. Mitchell.
No, I don't think, I'm just gonna...
You could trim it. You could trim
I'm
it.
gonna start. Hello, Mrs. Mitchell.
Hello.
How did your life change after your husband was appointed the attorney after Nixon died?
Oh my God, he didn't die.
How has this? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Well, when the president does it.
Oh my God. I started again.
Demonte, ready, set.
Simone.
Say go.
Go.
Everyone's judging me.
Hello, Mrs. Nixon.
Hello.
How are your days in the White House? Hello, Mrs. Nixon.
Hello.
What?
In directing the White House to... Come on, quick, stop it, turn house. That... I give up.